Today is exceptional because the topic that I've chosen is close to my heart. It's concerning my heart and is about matters of the heart, because Heart Talk is about heart-to-heart conversations of real issues in life concerning health, wealth, spiritual living. But today is of no exception because it's talking about emotions. We are emotional beings. And if there's anything that I would love to know more and learn more, would be how to handle, how to manage my emotions. And this has been a struggle for me. And I wish I knew, even though I'm a plastic surgeon and a medical doctor for the last, 40 or 45 years, what I haven't learned, I'm still learning though, is how to manage my emotions intelligently. And so this is going to be an eye-changer, a really changing mover, if it's something that matters to you too. Now, my guest today is a specialist in this field called emotional intelligence, focusing on the appropriate use of emotion by supporting personality and behavior in the business world, with the aim of increasing productivity and success at work. His experience ranges over 40 years of working in the marketplace and is currently teaching over 300,000 learners in 195 countries through his online emotional intelligence programs, which we would learn more later on. He's truly a guru in emotional intelligence. So without further ado, would you please join me to welcome Robin Hills, who comes to us live from Greater Manchester in the United Kingdom. Welcome, Robin. Come join us.
Good morning.
Morning. Yeah. I love the setting that you're in, and
it's quite a mindful setting, isn't it?
It is. It's all about being mindful and, and loving the present moment, Robin. And I think
because that's all we can do in the present moment, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely, to be paying attention to what is happening. So once again, welcome to Heart Talk. Thank you for giving me your time, and we just want to enjoy this company with you, because what we're going to talk about, Robin, are matters of the heart, and they are so deeply important. And as I said, and I've told many people, invitations can change your life. How we respond to an invitation can change the course of our life. And so here is an invitation to live a better version of ourselves. It's about living well, loving well, and thriving well. And so I want to congratulate you for all the work that you've done over the last 40 odd years. You've been such a blessing to the people around you. And once again, we are just delighted that you're joining us today on Heart Talk. So thank you for that.
It's my pleasure being here, and thank you ever so much. You're talking me up far more than I really deserve.
Well, I tell you something, if I had to read all your resumes, it would feel a suitcase. But let me start off, in the 1970s, there was a song that was close to my heart because, that was the time when I was in medical school, and it was sung by a man called Morris Albert. And I wonder if you remember, it was titled Feelings.
Oh, yes. Feelings, nothing more than
feelings. Ever since I met you, feelings of love. I like this part. Feelings, all my life I'm feeling. The whole purpose of living is that we are emotional beings. And feelings is so much part of our DNA, isn't it, Robin?
It is.
And I'm sure the studies of emotional intelligence, started after the song came out, because they must have decided, hey, listen, people are tuning into this thing, feelings. There must be more to it. So let's go deeper. That thing. And I mean, how long has this whole thing about emotional intelligence been in the public square?
Well, I like the idea of the academics from Yale University listening to a pop spot song and then suddenly having a light bulb moment and thinking, this is an area for us to academically study.
Yeah, I think this is what happened because, the whole world was moving with Dusty Springfield and Shirley Bassey and all that. And suddenly the whole emotions of feelings came into the being. And they said, well, let's make some money. Let's bottle this up, and sell it. But let's start from there, because there's a lot that's been bandied around. And I want to hear you. You're the expert. You're the guru in this field. How do you distinguish between feelings and emotion? Let's start from there.
That's a really interesting question. Let's go back to answer your first question. Emotional intelligence first came into the public consciousness in the 1990s. Daniel Goleman published his books. They're well-selling books on emotional intelligence. But that was based on the academic work from Yale University in the 1980s, where the words emotional intelligence were first used. I think over the last 30 years, emotional intelligence has become a bit of a buzzword, but it's not a fad. It's not something here today and gone tomorrow. I think it's now starting to get further embedded into the public consciousness. But because of that, there are a lot of myths that are floating around with regards to emotional intelligence. And there's a lot of rubbish spoken about emotional intelligence. And the question that you've posed for me, what is the difference between feelings and emotions, is a very basic question that many people don't ask around emotional intelligence. And I think it's a vitally important question for us to answer, because there is a distinction. And people will use the word emotions when they mean feelings, and they'll use the word feelings when they mean emotions.
Absolutely.
And be interchangeable, and they're not. Right. Emotions are specific reactions to events, whereas feelings are the perceptions that we have of sensations within our body. So what we will find with feelings, they're not necessarily related to emotions. So we will say things like, I'm feeling tired, or I'm feeling cold. Whereas with emotions, as I've said, these are specific reactions to certain events, and they include cognitive and physiological changes in our body to help prime us to act in a certain way. So they can be automatic and they can be unconscious, whereas a feeling, we will take continual readouts from our internal states, and they can be one component of emotions, or one component of emotion, but they are actually within our conscious awareness. So that is the basic difference between emotions and feelings.
That's powerful, because I'm glad you brought this delineation between the two, even though I'm sure that the emotions, I mean, let's talk about emotions before I start flowing into it. How many emotions are there? Because, I've been bandied around. There's 6 and then there's 7. Someone did a study and come up with 27. And my whole life has been an emotional bag. So,
Well, it depends upon which academic paper you're reading, because I've read papers which say that there are 3,000 emotions. And then I've read other papers which say that there are 27,000 emotions. So
there you go.
It depends. It depends. I prefer to start very, very simply and go to the work of Paul Ekman, who was an anthropologist in the 70s. And he worked with blind athletes. And he also worked with tribes of people in your area of the world that have been completely isolated from humanity. And what he found when he was working with these people is that there are 6 basic universal emotions, and his first paper identified 6 emotions.
Right.
Happiness, fear, sadness, anger, disgust, surprise, and sadness. So those are the basic emotions. Now, further studies he did suggested that there was a 7th emotion, and that's contempt, a feeling of superiority.
Yes.
So if we just take those 7 emotions and say, those are the basic emotions that are universal. So it doesn't matter whether you're in Malaysia, it doesn't matter whether you're in the United Kingdom, it doesn't matter whether you're in Iceland, it doesn't matter if you're in Venezuela or in New Zealand, you will experience the same emotions physiologically, and you will express them in the same way on your face as everybody else. And then we will have blends of emotions that come in. So there are other emotions such as guilt, which is an emotion around something that happened in the past. We can't do anything about it. Hence, we will feel guilty. And then there are other emotions such as anticipation, which is looking to an event at some point in the future. And we can do something about it, but there's an emotion that we're feeling currently around that situation.
Right. No, perfect. I mean, this is, I'm going to take you deeper and deeper so that, just like those waves that are coming on shore behind you, each time they come in, they bring a new drift, and then we take them out. But I want to get deeper, Robin. When you're talking about these emotions, which are 6, 7 emotions and all that, how do they play out in our lives? In the sense that, for example, when I talk to the neuroscientist and they say, okay, the thalamus is a relay station, the amygdala does this, it's Mary, and things like this happen. When these 6 emotions, are they in one particular place of the brain, or are they just, how are they expressed from the neuroscience point of view? I mean, you're a scientist.
I am, and I must say I don't know, and I don't think we know. And I think, are they created at some particular point in the brain? Do they sit within the cortex somewhere? And are they disseminated through the amygdala and the limbic system of the brain, the emotional part of the brain? We know that the amygdala and the limbic system filter emotions, but where are they generated? We just don't know. There was some work done by Dr. Ledoux from an American university only fairly recently to suggest that they are generated within the cortex somewhere. Now, the cortex is more the rational part of the brain. So is there a thinking component which generates the emotions? Well, we don't know. I think the important thing around emotions, let's go back to the distinction that I gave you at the beginning. It is we experience them as a reaction to our environment. So what our emotions are doing is providing us with data, with information that we should learn to interpret so that we can then make the most of these emotions. So our emotions are telling us there's something going on around me that I need to be physiologically and psychologically aware of so that I can prepare myself in order to deal with it in a more appropriate way. And I think what we've done over the years is we tend to shut down that data and we just kind of react to the emotion rather than actually then saying, perhaps I ought to be going back even deeper myself into why I'm experiencing this emotion in the first place.
Right. Okay, so now let's just marry the two together. So you've got emotional on one side and you've got intelligence on the other side. And so you put both the words together, which is now the science of the 21st century. How do you, it's about being smart with your feelings. Now you separated the two, and now we are bringing intelligence, which is the smart aspect of it. And how do you deal smartly with your feelings? The reason why I'm saying these two together is, like I've told you, like, in my field in plastic surgery, we're talking about anti-aging. And I tell them, no, it's not about anti-aging, it's about smart aging. Because you can't run away from the fact that, we all age, but can we age smartly? So we all have these emotions with us, which have feelings, and how can we handle them smartly? And that's when EI comes in. Talk to us about that, because you've put a totally different flavor to the feelings part of it and the emotions part of it. So how do we step back and say, okay, now I've got feelings there. Now how can I be smart with it and manage it well? Am I in the right flow?
Yes, I think we're getting somewhere quite deep as you wanted to go. I think if we go back to emotions being a psychological and a physiological reaction to our environment, or preparing our body for a psychological or a physiological reaction, we're then in a situation where we can say, okay, this is data. Now I can use my cognitive rationality to interpret this and to apply my intelligence to say, I am feeling anger. I know why I'm feeling angry, because someone has transgressed one of my core values. How do I utilize that emotion to get the best from the situation? Right. Now, anger is something that a lot of people want to suppress. And I say, no, if you're feeling angry, use that anger in an appropriate way. Somebody has done something that you don't agree with. Go and utilize that anger. Use the drive and the energy within that anger to right that wrong.
Powerful. Powerful. Because the word you used, which I believe is the very core of how we handle all these faculties, is the word appropriate. Because the moment you put the inappropriate to it, it takes a different swing. And it opens up the doors of everything else other than being appropriate, and when we talk about behavior and all that. So, because at the end of the day, you're trying to combine thinking with your feelings to make quality decisions, right? So how did you get into this world of emotions and finally emotional intelligence, and now you are the guru of this field? I mean, how has this been for you personally in your life? How did you decide, look, this is something I want to do? Were you in a place where the intelligence was in a different zone? Like me, I have a messed up life. When I look at if I want to measure my emotions, I just wish, as the song Feelings goes, I just wish I never met you.
Well, I'm going to take you somewhere where it will open up a can of worms, and it will be quite surprising. And hopefully we will still have a good relationship at the end of it, because it is your profession that drove me into the field of emotional intelligence. I must admit that the medical and the surgical profession have been my making for the wrong reasons. Let me explain.
Okay.
I got my degree in biology, and I wanted to do something with that degree, but I wanted to get some more experience. So I went into medical selling. I was a medical representative, and I worked in London. And I did the job for a number of companies, and eventually worked as a hospital representative for a major pharmaceutical company. It was the #1 pharmaceutical company in the world at the time, in the London teaching hospitals, selling antibiotics, anti-cancer medicines, anti-migraine medicines, or medicines for gastroenterology, gastric ulcers, peptic ulcers. And I found that there were some doctors who I had an affinity with, and there were some doctors who would not speak to me because of who I was. Well, the label that they put on me. I was a rep for a pharmaceutical company, and they didn't want to know. They did not want to know. And often they would leave the job as part of their medical rotation, and a new doctor would come in. And the new doctor would be a completely different beast. They would be really friendly, really affable, really open, had all the time in the world for me, had little stress. And I was thinking, well, what's the difference here? Because The job's the same, the environment's the same, the team is the same, the functionality of what the person is doing and performing is the same. The difference was the person. And
Absolutely.
it wasn't the intelligence of the person, because everybody has to be relatively intelligent to be in the medical profession in the first place.
Right.
So what was it? Well, I didn't know. And I didn't know because basically, as a species, we didn't know, because this was the time when emotional intelligence was still in the academic world. So I then got a job up in the Northwest, leading and managing teams of medical representatives, hospital representatives. And it was at that time Daniel Goldman published his book, and I read a review in one of the Saturday papers, and suddenly there was a light bulb moment. This is the answer to that question.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, this is what I want to find more about. So I went away and studied it, learned about it, started to recognize how it worked. And then my role was made redundant. So I went into clinical research, which is, we were researching various medicines and various surgical pieces of equipment and things like that. I was doing a management and leadership role, recruiting people into clinical studies.
Mm-hmm.
And then that role was made redundant. And I thought, at this particular moment in time, now is a good time to really set up a business focused on bringing more emotional intelligence into the world. So that's my story. That's where I came from. And that's why emotional intelligence is so important to me.
I mean, it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that with us, because I can understand how you feel, because I know how I treated medical reps anyway. And they'll have to sit there till the end of the day at 4, 5 o'clock. And so, I realized that they were human beings at the same time, and they were just doing their job. But you brought a very powerful aspect of emotional intelligence, and which, I mean, I can't understand those who are not, running to it and running away from it. And that is quality. You see, at the end of the day, we're talking about the quality of life. And here we have a tool, if I can call it a tool, that's going to take a quality of relationships right from the home base to the marketplace. So talk to us about how this has been for you, this whole world and field of emotional intelligence. How has the intelligence part handled your own emotions within your family concept, within your sphere of influence, within friends? How has that been such a powerful tool that you have, married with all these years?
I can't answer that question because I don't know the answer to it. The interesting thing is, I know all about emotional intelligence. I know the theory. I know how to put it into practice. Does it make me more emotionally intelligent? I think the answer to that question, well, if I answer, oh, yes, it's rather arrogant and self-conceited, isn't it? And if I answer no, why am I working in the field of emotional intelligence? It depends. It's work in progress. There are times when I'll go into a situation and I'll react and I'll make good decisions and I'll build relationships and I'll do it really well. And I'll feel really good about it when I come away from the situations, from that situation. And I'll reflect and think, yeah, that worked well. That worked well. That didn't. And then I'll go into other situations and I'll completely screw up. And the reason being is I'm human like you are. So I'm not going to get it right all the time. Right. And if my wife of almost 40 years and I have a disagreement, you can bet your bottom dollar that she's going to rub my nose in emotional intelligence
That's
and tell
right.
me I'm not being emotionally intelligent
Yeah.
at that time. So, I can get it thrown in my face at every opportunity when it's appropriate. So.
Absolutely. I mean, I would shake your hand and give you a hug for that, because they won't even rub my nose. They'll rub my whole body down, and because how do you delineate between someone who's got a high emotional intelligence and somebody who's got a low emotion? Because if you look at the quality of relationship that I have had, and what I've been through, like I've said many times, and I've shared with you, Robin, was the way that I managed my own emotions. I didn't know. It's only these last 2 years that I look at those waves and I understand what mindfulness is about. And so much of these words, and later on I'm going to ask you about things like resilience and all. These are terms that are bandied out in the marketplace, but I've still lived 40 years of my life. And I wish that you were my neighbor, because I would have handled myself much better. But tell me, where is emotional intelligence going now? I mean, where do we take it to?
Well, I think what we need to do is to get emotional intelligence further invested within the business world. I think your fraternity, your profession has a long, long way to go. And before we went on air, we were having some conversations around evidence-based medicine as being the buzzword. Well, it's been the buzzword for the last 40 years within the National Health Service here within the United Kingdom. I get really, really annoyed when I hear that phrase, because I go along to them with evidence around emotional intelligence. I might as well be talking to next door's cat. Yeah. So they talk about evidence-based medicine. Here's the evidence, put it into the practice of medicine, and they don't. And Absolutely. The National Health Service here in the United Kingdom is still stuck in the last century, and it's creeping into the 21st century, but imperceptibly slowly. So it's got a long, long way to go before it catches up with the business world. The business world is making some great progress, but it's still got a long way to go. Still got a long way to go. We've all got a long way to go, and we can all help and support each other. Just look at the issue of climate change, and look at the way in which the world is reacting to that. It disgusts me. It makes me very angry. It is drawing up all my unpleasant emotions. And these are the things that I think we ought to be channeling to do something different for everybody. It's not happening. We listen to the politicians and they argue nonsense most of the time.
I know. I mean, it happens here too, but closer to home, I think all that is happening around us, at least if I look back now, is this whole negativity and a resistance to the human condition of trying to get it better. Right. You see, if you don't, every human experience cannot happen without a human condition being conditioning. And that's where the resistance is coming in, because everybody is quite happy at status quo as long as there are more diseases in the marketplace. And the hospitals are doing more and more, getting better, living on disease, as opposed to spreading an epidemic of anti-inflammatory information across the world. And this is something that we're going to live with, because the human condition will never change until, I've got a scar on my chest because of my own history of self-denial, not being able to, to accept and change, you see, as much as I want to. So this is where I'm coming to more of the self now, because I think that if there's one thing that I've realized now is to just take a pause in life, stop, and have a look within. I've said this many times, Robin, this whole thing about emotions and all that, it's like a mirror, looking in a mirror. A mirror can never lie what you look at. and it's like shadows. They'll follow you forever. You cannot run away from a shadow. So emotions to me are forever there in the mirror first thing in the morning, and they're shadowing with you wherever you go. So I think this is the frontier of medicine, is how do we handle our emotions, both in the home, which is more of a marketplace today, because people are living more and more at home and doing work from home, and in the marketplace outside. So what I'm trying to come to now is talk to us about self-awareness, self-perception. I mean, how do you grade these different parts of this emotional intelligence? I mean, how do you assess oneself? Do we need that assessment? I don't think I want to go for a test, because I can see what I've done. And somebody would say, Charles, you got a very low emotional intelligence for what you've done. The quality of your relationships is just messed up. So what do you say to that?
Well, let's have a look at emotional intelligence as a construct and very quickly unpick it to help there, because there is a lot within this. Firstly, we've got the inner world. This is the self. This is what goes on inside our head. It's what goes on inside our body. And the first component of emotional intelligence is awareness of self. What is it that we're good at? What are our strengths? What are our limitations? What is it that we can do to make a difference? How do we choose to live our life? Now, the next component is the action and behavior within ourselves that nobody else sees. So how do we utilize our thought processes and our emotions? How do we regulate ourselves? And then the outer world is the outer world of things, events, people, situations. How aware are we of the emotions and the thoughts and the reactions and behaviors of other people? How do we learn to empathize with those? We don't necessarily need to agree with them. We just need to understand that's empathy. And then we transfer that into action and behavior. How do we build up these authentic relationships? By utilizing our communication skills, our social skills. Now, of course, none of this will work unless we've got the right level of motivation. So how do we motivate ourselves in order to motivate others? And that, in a nutshell, is emotional intelligence.
No, it's powerful, because it takes all the faculties of just science of life and putting it into motion. Because at the end of the day, it's more of thriving as opposed to surviving. I love the word thriving, in excellence, because thriving for me is my GDP. Even when I talk about thriving to people, it's really your gross, domestic product. I call it growth, development, and prosperity. So to thrive is to be able to bring all these three elements out and end up with success, which is what you become. As opposed to survival. Survival is always the danger of what it is. Whether you're a cancer survivor, the danger is death when it comes to survival. And so, I mean, how do you see this in the marketplace in the next 20, 30, 40 years? We've talked about the psychological aspect of emotional intelligence. We talked about the physiological part of it. Talk to me about the spiritual part of it, because to me, emotions are very much an expression of the spiritual person inside of us.
It is, but I don't think we're there yet. I think what we've got to do is to get the idea of emotions being better established within the business environment, and get the business environment to recognize that emotions have a place. And if we can work with those emotions in a more positive way and get them to work for us, we will be more successful, more profitable. We will have better performance through that. Once that's then better established, we are starting to see here within the United Kingdom the idea of spiritual intelligence coming into play. Now, I think we are 30, 40, 50 years away from that starting to come into the business environment. I think as far as the NHS is concerned, the National Health Service here in the United Kingdom, we can forget about that until next century. But I think what we will see is more spiritual awareness coming in, whereby we can then look at how we utilize our energy for the greater good. But we're a long way from that. And I think what I can do in the present day, at the present moment, is to really work on getting people to start to reflect more on emotional intelligence.
I mean, that's pointed. And, when we think of something in continuum, I think this is where the intelligence of how we handle our emotions, I mean, how we can be refined. It's something that we can learn, right? Because you made a statement that I'm still trying to digest, and that is, after 70, the chances of you developing your EI is pretty slim. So I want to get some hope from you.
Well, all I'm doing is going back to the academic studies that suggest that we can develop our emotional intelligence up to about the age of 70. Now, you shared with me earlier this week that you have reached that grand age. I'm a few years away from it, but just because you've passed your 70th birthday doesn't mean to say that you're going to stop being emotionally intelligent. And I think if we look at the majority of 70-year-olds within the world, as you know, there's a continuum. There are some which will gladly develop their emotional intelligence well into their 80s, and there are some in that group that will have stopped in their 60s.
Absolutely.
So where are you within that continuum? That's your choice.
That's right. At the end of the day, you're right. At the end of the day, it's all about we are the product of our choices and not the byproduct of our responses. And I know there's so much more to discuss with you, but I want to kind of end on this note. Can you measure emotional intelligence?
This is a really interesting question, because EI is often abbreviated to EQ. And you will have seen people talking about EQ, thinking, oh, I'm being really, really important here because I'm using the right phrase, EQ. EQ is emotional quotient, like IQ is intellectual quotient.
Right.
IQ is a measure of how intelligent you are. EQ is a measure of how emotionally intelligent you are. Now, emotional intelligence itself, EI, is broader than EQ.
Right.
It'll bring in things like the unconscious awareness and things that you can't measure, attitudes and unconscious bias and prejudices and things like that can't be measured. So EQ is everything that can be measured. So, and there are some really good, powerful psychometrics that are commercially available that will measure emotional intelligence. And I'm qualified in one or in two of those, EI trait, emotional intelligence, and the EQI 2.0. And these are both brilliant tools for giving an insight into people's emotional intelligence. It helps with their self-awareness, and it will also help because it will suggest these are the areas that you can work on and improve your emotional intelligence if only you were to be a little bit more consciously aware of these facets which need a degree of improvement. So we can measure self-awareness, we can measure self-regulation, we can measure empathy, we can measure social skills, we can measure decision-making, we can measure stress management, and all of that will give us a complete picture of that person's emotional intelligence at the time that they took the questionnaire.
Right. I mean, that's a powerful way to end, because at the end of the day, one of the most intriguing questions would be, how will you measure your life? And no matter, no test can ever fill that in, and that is, how have we impacted the life of another? Would be the real take home for all of us. because of the way I'm hearing you today in this discussion, if the brain takes up and consumes 20% of the energy that it needs a day, if we can conserve that energy by using our emotions in a much more sensible and intelligent way, we would have conserved. That's MindFLOW Ergonomics, which I'm writing about. And I did a post today I called it the windmills of the mind. That if each emotion is like a windmill, imagine the amount of energy it generates. But if it's creating good productivity and the end result is a beautiful life, well lived, I think that's a take home for the whole concept of emotional intelligence. So how do people get in touch with you, Robin?
Well, I'm available throughout the internet. Just put in Robin Hill's emotional intelligence and I will come up in Google quite readily. Find me on LinkedIn. Look for me on Facebook. My website is ei4change.com. That's EI, emotional intelligence, 4change.com. Or you can contact me at robin@ei4change.com.
Wonderful. Well, there you go, everyone listening in. And so on that note, Robin, what's a take home for all of us to stay intelligent with our emotions?
Strive for a happy life and make the best of what you've got.
Point taken, point received, and registered right down there. I think there's been a wonderful, really enlightening discussion on this topic. And I'm sure we'll have you again as we continue to ride the waves and ride the storms of life. And, it's such a beautiful scenery behind you, and we will meet there again one time. So from all of us here, thank you once again, Robin, on behalf of my producers, Mary and Heidi over here. You've been a wonderful guest with us. And from all of us here, thank you very much for joining us on Heart Talk. So thank you all for joining us on Heart Talk. And as you know, we will put the links on our, when we do the video editing, and finally you get to receive it. And so from all of us, stay tuned. Remember, it's about how intelligent you are to manage your emotions. And the take home is live well, love well, thrive well, because it's a beautiful life. We'll talk again.